For the introduction. That was great. And thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. This is my second time speaking at a Tsinghua affiliated event. The first time was last year. I was invited to speak at the Alumni and Art Dive Convention in Washington, D.C. That was not only a great experience for us kids, but also an important opportunity to build bridges between generations and understand each other better. And building bridges between generations is baked into the goal of the Lighthouse program. And that's why I'm so excited to be here today. When we pass on knowledge with intention and relay experiences to each other in this way, we empower our community to come together and break through the glass ceiling. And so today, I would like to share a few stories from my career in figure skating that illustrate the importance of an entrepreneurial spirit and the necessity of an offensive mindset. My message is that regardless of what career we're talking about, sports, business, anything, success is largely determined by your mental approach. A lot of you probably know about the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle. It basically says that 80% of results come from 20% of causes or factors. And in this context, I'd say that 80% of my results in my skating career came from about 20% or less of my preparation. Now, from a naive standpoint, I spend most of my actual, or almost all of my actual day-to-day time training physically. But the results I see come from the intentionality with which I approach my training and the mindset I have when I step on the ice. That intentionality and mindset drives how much effort I actually put in and whether or not that effort is directed into the right things. And so when competition day comes, at the top level, every one of my competitors is just as physically capable, if not more, than me. And there are 5 or more skaters that could win on any given day. It's the mental game that makes the biggest difference. One of my former coaches always told me that I don't have to be the better skater to win, I have to be the better competitor on the day of competition. And if you look at the greatest of all time, it's undeniable that they're great skaters, but what sets them apart is they're even better competitors. That's what makes the real difference. Now, people say that being a good competitor isn't a skill that can be taught. Some people are just naturally born that way. But I don't think that's completely true. I think anyone can learn the right approach to becoming a winner. I think the only prerequisite is that you need to have a general sense of what you want out of your efforts in the long term. And my hope in talking about this today is that you can walk out of here with a better approach to any challenge you face, and that you discover a newfound willingness to challenge the status quo. So let's begin. My personal story of challenging the status quo starts very early on in my life. When I was young, I played many sports, including soccer, tennis, swimming, basketball, you name it. But one stood head and shoulders above the others, and that was figure skating. I loved it. I loved the feeling of racing around the rink and moving with a freedom that was only achievable on the ice. And then there was also the idea that I might be really good one day. Yeah, maybe I loved that too. Maybe I loved that idea more than the actual sport itself. I just wanted to be good at something. But the thing about figure skating is that there's no system in the Bay Area to excel. There was a system to be a figure skater, but there was no system to be a champion figure skater. And there were no informational channels for us to just go and find out information about how to get somewhere in the sport. And furthermore, skating is not an NCAA sport. The federation doesn't have much money, there isn't a national training center, there's no coalition of top coaches pooling resources and knowledge like there are in other sports. It's every person for themselves, it's survival of the fittest. And on top of that, elite skating careers end in your early to mid-20s if you're lucky. Everyone walks away with chronic injuries, and to even have a chance of getting to the Team USA level, you've got to sacrifice everything out of your own pocket and forge your own path. It sounds almost like the startup world, and the only VCs willing to fund your efforts are your parents. Of course, when I started out, I had no idea how hard it would be. I'm almost glad nobody told us, because if my mom and I had known the difficulties and the painful times we'd have to endure, I don't think we would have committed to it. But my mom and I have always shared this mindset, this unshakable belief that no matter how badly I fail, no matter how impossible the challenge seems, I'm always going to find a way to move through it, because I have to. Giving up just was never in my blood. Most coaches get mad at their students for being lazy. My coaches got mad at me for doing too much. I would try and try and try again, hundreds of attempts on one jump during a 1 hour session. Because regardless of the fact that I couldn't do it, I just wouldn't accept that I couldn't. I was convinced I would figure out how if I just tried enough. And that mindset has taken me so far. Knowing how to handle fear of failure is the first step to discovering success. You know, I'm still like that today. I've taken up bouldering recently in the last 2 years, and I'll try a single climb over and over again until I can't feel my forearms and my fingertips are raw. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to succeed, and if I feel like I've got a valid method or pathway, then I will relentlessly pursue it and ignore the discomfort. Of course, that also means I'm very committed to what I choose to do, including emotionally. I get emotionally attached to the possibility of succeeding, and my efforts hold me captive. The downside of that is if I fail, the feeling of failure is magnified. I just mentioned not being afraid of failure, but when you commit fully to something and you put your heart and soul into it, choosing to trust that your effort will not let you down, how can you not be afraid of failure? It's like the higher you climb, the further you fall. But there is, I think, a secret to overcoming this fear, to overcoming that unshakable feeling that success is mandatory and any other result would be catastrophic. After all, how would I function in any competition ever if I didn't have that mindset? So the secret, I think, is an approach. It's a way of framing things. And in the world of Caroline Sylvie and Vincent Zhou, we call it an offensive mindset as opposed to a defensive mindset. The offensive mindset entails keeping an open mind. My coach would talk to me before sessions. I would tell him that I was really tired or not warmed up, and I felt like I couldn't perform on the upcoming session. And my coach would go, "Okay, good, but finish the sentence." And I'd look at him in confusion. What do you mean by that? He would go, "I don't feel warmed up, and keep it going." Like, that can't be all. I don't feel warmed up, and I can still do this anyway. He would always tell me that it's good to acknowledge how I feel and stay present, but I should always finish the sentence. It doesn't end with me being tired. It doesn't end with me feeling like I can't do it. There's more left to give. One thing he says that will always stick with me is keep an open mind to the possibility that you might still accomplish something. I take that with me everywhere I go. I always talk to my inner voice and say, sure, you feel nervous, tense, unprepared. Sure, something might go wrong. And why not be open to the possibility that you might have the state of your life anyway? It's a real possibility, is it not? And so that mindset has helped me calm down nerves, approach challenges with a level head, and face otherwise impossible seeming situations without reservation. The offensive mindset means that you are not afraid to try and push forwards. You are not afraid of the chance that you might fail. You've already come to terms with that possibility, and it's fine because you recognize that you are equipped to succeed. If you stay open-minded and stay on the prowl looking for opportunities to make ground, and always recognize the real chance of things turning out how you want, you're much more likely to succeed. Now, the flip side, the defensive mindset, is one of perfectionism, fear of failure. The idea that if you fail, the world is going to end, and everything you do is to try and prevent that from happening. Unfortunately, I'm a perfectionist. I'm probably the biggest perfectionist you'll ever be. And it's a double-edged sword. It's partially responsible for my tendency to go at something repeatedly until I succeed, which is undoubtedly a big driver of my success. But it's also responsible for the fear of failure that I inevitably experience at times. And this defensive mindset can be crippling. Let me give you an example. So I remember feeling this way before the 2022 National Championships. I was actually physically stronger and more prepared than I've ever been I was physically stronger and more prepared than I'd ever been, yet I felt more vulnerable than ever because the stakes were at an all-time high. This was my ticket to the 2022 Olympics, and I wanted to put on a performance worthy of an Olympic medal, even though it wasn't the Olympics yet. And I ended up in this weird mental space where I was very physically primed. I knew I was trained and more than ready to put on a great performance, but the unshakable feeling of needing to be perfect made it impossible for me to function at all. It felt like even during simple motions like drinking water or walking, I had to think and intentionally tell my body what to do. And when it was my turn to take the ice, every single motion felt really forced, very mechanical. Like I had to tell myself to do this with my arm and do this with my leg. But in a sport where milliseconds determine whether you succeed or fail, you can't afford to think. You have to do. Everyone here has been through a stressful job interview before, right? If you have, you know what I'm talking about. The interviewer asks you a question you've prepared for, but you freeze up in the moment. You think to yourself, I should know the answer. Why is it not coming to mind? And then the more you think, the harder you try, the more you can't remember. You end up stuttering for a while and delivering a less than satisfactory answer. But you know that if you were just practicing yourself outside of this interview setting, you'd be just fine. So why is it so different performing under pressure? It's the same reason you can walk in a straight line very easily on a normal sidewalk, but the moment you try to do it on the edge of the curb, you feel like you're gonna fall off. The mindset of not being able to fail, of having no margin for error, changes everything. When you're tense and defensive, you lose your creativity, your adaptability, and your ability to think and react on the fly. We would be much better off with the approach of building the desired result one piece at a time, believing in the security and validity of the proven process to carry you to the desired outcome. And all you have to do is just begin. Now, the other thing I mentioned earlier was the importance of an entrepreneurial spirit. To me, that means never being afraid to think beyond what I see right now. What we think is realistic is so often shaped by our very limited experiences, as well as the opinions of those around us. And so I want to share a story about a scientist named Robert Millikan. He won the Nobel Prize for accurately measuring the charge of an electron. But what they didn't tell you is that he actually didn't measure it accurately. He got it wrong. The number he got was too low. But we know that today because we found out that he used an incorrect calculation for air viscosity. Don't ask me to define that. I don't know what air viscosity is. Anyway, after Millikan, scientists continued to recalculate the charge of an electron because that's the nature of science, right? It's to validate and replicate results. Otherwise, it's not a valid scientific finding. So, some scientists got a number around what Millikan got, and some got a number that was a little bit higher. But what happened, interestingly, was that the numbers that were close to what Millikan got were accepted. And then, when the number got too high, everyone decided it was too far off, so they ruled it out. So if you look at how the accepted electron charge changed over time, it slowly increased bit by bit until it reached the actual correct number. It took years, decades. And we know that the correct number was always up there. So why did they think something was wrong when they got the correct number at first? And more importantly, in real life, when there's no hard science to tell you if what you're doing is correct or not, how do you get to that metaphorical high number when nobody thinks that it's possible? People are easily fooled. There is no easier act of fooling than a view by yourself. If you believe something, you'll always find a reason to justify it. The scientists thought that a number that high was impossible, and so it was, until it wasn't. At some point in history, everyone had grounds to believe that the next major development was impossible. Airplanes, telephones, semiconductors, you name it. And in each instance, all it took was one man with a vision to create something that would change the world. Some of you probably think immortality is impossible. You can see where I'm going with this, right? My point is the greatest moments happen when people aren't bothered by what others think is or isn't impossible. It always happens like this. I'll give you an example from my own career. Vincent Zhou talked about the quad lutz that I landed at the Olympics. So that jump, I actually landed in practice for the first time on my third try, all the way back in 2016. Quad lutz is one of the hardest jumps in figure skating, and it involves 4 rotations in the air. Most skaters in the current generation have never even had to think about a time when the quad lutz didn't exist, because nowadays so many people can do it. It's like everyone and their mom can do it. Anyway, at the time, only 3 other people in the world were doing quad lutzes. The first one was landed all the way back in 2011, and then nobody was able to repeat it until 2014. And the third person hadn't even done it in competition at the time, so we didn't even know that there was a third person who could do it. Basically, to me and everyone else, the quad lutz was a myth. It was to us what sentient AI probably is to all of you today. So you talk about it, and people would look at you like you were crazy. I mentioned to some friends that I wanted to try it, and they looked at me like I was joking. And they were like, I don't think they even listened to me, because they just were like, oh, that's just Vincent saying Vincent things again. So they didn't think I was serious. But